Episode of A Modern Nonprofit Podcast. I'm Tasha Anderson, your host today, but I brought along a friend of mine, Elliot Dole. He is, what would you consider yourself, a financial advisor, an investment manager? What is your official title, Elliot?
Yeah, I'm a wealth advisor. Yeah.
Wealth advisor. So he is here to talk about something that's really, really fascinating to me. Elliot, you and I started talking, I don't know, several months ago about, high net wealth donors and how they make decisions on who and what and where to give their money to, and more importantly, why they don't give their money. So you work with high net wealth individuals, just on their overall wealth strategy. Is that right? So you kind of see things from a different perspective, a different lens than maybe we normally see. And so I'm really interested in talking to you. So thanks for being here today.
Thanks, Tasha. Yeah, and I think at 10,000 feet, I do work with wealthy donors and have a focus within my wealth management practice and working with donors who have a philanthropic bend. And so usually what you see with the clients is that they're looking to spend a certain amount in their lifetime, leave some to perhaps children or other individuals, and leave some to charity. And so some of them have very significant charitable goals. And, with all of those goals, particularly the legacy goals, there's a question of, do they make those gifts during their lifetime or do they make them posthumously?
Gotcha. So let's dive into a few questions that you and I were kind of tossing around last time we talked about this. And frankly, some questions that I get occasionally, or at least that I've pondered, right? So what do professional advisors like yourself report believing holds back wealthy clients from making larger charitable gifts? So why aren't they making larger gifts, would you say?
Yeah, and so, the question of why don't wealthy donors give more? Why don't they make larger gifts? Has actually been looked at in a study that's been done every 5 years for since starting in about 2013 through U.S. Trust. And what the study found in polling the advisors of these wealthy clients was that they attribute the lack of making larger gifts, particularly to not having the tax, the estate, income tax savings on making those gifts, as a primary driver of that. And also what they reported attributing that to, anyway, in their professional advisors' opinion, they looked at clients being concerned that they did not have enough for themselves or that their children would not get enough.
Gotcha. So there wasn't enough money at the time to make even a larger gift. So different perspective then. So not from the financial advisor's perspective, but from the donor's perspective, what would you say, or what have you heard from donors for why they haven't made to larger gifts?
Yeah, and so both in terms of what I've heard and also what the data out there seems to show is that donors themselves agree that the tax benefits are important, that making sure that they have enough for themselves is important, making sure that kids have enough is all important. So everyone agrees on that point. What's really interesting in the data out there is that what they then report is to say that the reasons that they don't make larger gifts actually have to do with very qualitative things, that they have concern that the charities will just ask them for more, that their gift will be wasted, or that they perhaps don't feel a connection to the cause that really prohibits them from making bigger gifts.
Interesting. So it's more their connection than their financial, which is not surprising, really, when you kind of think about it. But it's really interesting from an accounting perspective. That works really closely with nonprofits. We often hear, there's a change in the tax code, or there's a new administration in office, and how's this going to impact, charitable giving one year over the other. And I've certainly personally seen some upticks where tax advantages are made possible in certain years, but you still see really large gifts come in even when those tax incentives aren't necessarily there. So that kind of speaks true to what I've seen as well.
Right.
So what do you think advisors can do to help donors make larger gifts? And if not just advisors, I guess really advisors or other kind of financial professionals, that tax people or whoever else might be working with donors.
Yeah, and I think an important part of the equation here too are the development team at the charities themselves.
Mm.
And I think that the ideal way to help a client make a large gift, and when we talk about this, I mean, we're really talking about gifts that the clients themselves ultimately believe in and want to make. And so it's not at all about trying to get anybody to do anything that's either uncomfortable or really unintended. It's really, from a process standpoint, making sure that folks have enough for themselves, that folks have their legacy goals for their children or other non-charitable beneficiaries laid out to where they're comfortable that there's enough for those parties. And then you kind of look at what's left over and start to look at possibilities of what's important there. What's important about the types of causes that you want to support, the pathways in which you make those gifts. Are they during life, or does it involve perhaps the next generation? And so I think when you start looking at these things, you kind of find that when you get through the mechanical part of enough for them, enough for kids, that you get to some very qualitative areas that really come down to, in part, identifying the charities themselves, and then the pathway and the timing of helping them feel really comfortable about how they go about making those gifts.
Good. So really kind of running some numbers and scenario planning and kind of evaluating all those things. So flipping that script a little bit then, because I know the people that are listening might fall into more of, I'm the development director, I'm the founder, CEO of a nonprofit. How do those individuals start, kind of pushing for those larger gifts, or at least getting their donors a little bit more comfortable with increasing their gift size, or leaving maybe a planned gift or a legacy gift?
Right. I think that the best answer for that is to really look at the process of donor engagement. Sometimes these things are sparked by some sort of event or some sort of outreach, and looking ahead to where donors can get stuck. And if they get stuck, to use a term that a mentor of mine, Phil Cubeta of the American College, laid out, this concept of a legacy home run, where you have on first base enough for them, on second base enough for kids, and on third base what's left over. Looking at the giving process, if folks are going to get stuck on the base paths, if you will, then what does the development team have, in terms of some forethought there of saying, okay, then how do we work with that donor's advisor? If they're stuck on first, how do we connect them with a CFP, with somebody who, ideally they're already working with, and if not, to find somebody else who can come in and help them solve that problem, figuring out how much is enough for them, and so on. And so I think that's really the thing that seems to work the best in the field, is to look at it as a development team and a planning team, to say, where are folks likely to get stuck, and if there's a whole host of different opportunities to cultivate gifts, that knowing that you just don't know who, but folks are going to get stuck. So what sort of legacy advisory board might the charity have to fall back on to help assist as people get stuck on the base paths?
Yeah, that's good. I have to ask one more question, Elliot. It wasn't something I thought about until just now. But there's going to be a lot of people out there listening to this that wonders, look, Elliot, we're a small organization. It's great. Yep, we should talk to the donors, advising team, their investment managers, their wealth managers. How do you or your clients, how does a nonprofit that's not widely known or known yet by these different advisors, how do they get connected? Or how do you find the charities that your donors, let's say, for example, they didn't, there's always certainly those donors, they'll give to their faith communities, or they'll give to, maybe a nonprofit that their family has historically, supported. Let's talk about those other wild cards where, you have a donor that doesn't have anything specific in mind. They just have a cause. Like, how do you match them up, or how do you find nonprofits, or more importantly, how would they find you or someone like you to get connected to donors that maybe haven't had a chance to get introduced before? How do we make that connection?
And so I want to make sure I understand the question. In the first part of the question, I heard, a question about how donors can get connected with causes. And is there a second part of that, of how they then get the professional help maybe to align with their situation? Or
It's really, how does nonprofits that don't have connections with these wealth managers or with these wealthy
Hmm.
donors, how do they get that introduction?
Hmm.
So there are sometimes you have clients I know that already have connections with nonprofits and they already have a plan mapped out for who they're going to leave their money to. But there's some more donors, some clients I'm sure that you have a pot of money, but they haven't really earmarked that towards an organization. How do we match those two people up? How do you get introduced to nonprofits, or how do they get introduced to you in cases like that where there's not already a defined, I'm leaving my money to these organizations?
Hmm.
Do you find that common or no?
I find that what's common is that, it all seems from two perspectives here. One, it seems really well reasoned that, well-meaning financial advisors, lawyers, CPAs,
Hmm.
can, cultivate business for themselves by aligning themselves with charities and get referrals that way. And,
Hmm.
it really hardly happens that way. I mean, and vice
Mm.
versa. I think a lot of times development folks rightly need to cultivate relationships with professional advisors, but not for the purpose of referral, and specifically not that type of referral where a client, is a high capacity donor and has, some money that's earmarked for charity, and maybe their organization would be a good one. I
Hmm.
think that tends to be sort of a lottery ticket, and it's just there's so
Hmm.
many out there, from both sides of it, that tends to be pretty low yield. What your question really sparks for me, and I think that this is really impactful for those small charities that you allude to, is that having a, developing a legacy advisory board that really allows the development team to make sure that you've got, resources that can be brought to bear on the client, their prospective donors' issues, does a couple of things. One, it helps people get unstuck in the giving process, and then two, I think that it helps create some pathways for those organizations to get some experience and confidence in working with the donors' existing advisors, who may be completely different advisors from the legacy board.
Hmm. Gotcha. Well, that's helpful. So, Elliot, if there are people listening that want to get more information about, let's say you are a donor and you want to start making plans for, legacy gifts, or, planned, wealth management, or planned giving in that sense, and you don't already have a plan. Or alternatively, if you're a nonprofit and you're starting to formalize some sort of planned giving program, and they wanted to chat with you or someone from your firm, what's the best way to reach you or get in contact with your firm?
Yeah, that I would love to, work with any donors who are looking for planning help, and also with development teams who are looking to, improve uh, their giving programs, and whether it's planned gifts, blended gifts, major gifts.
Hmm.
I just would love to hear from development teams. The best way to reach me, our website is buckinghamwp.com, so Buckingham Wealth Partners, and my name's Elliot Dole, and the door is open. So I'd love to hear from folks.
Great. So we'll put that in the show notes for anybody that wants your website. And if people want to get in touch with you, they can kind of go there, and hopefully we can connect some nonprofits with donors, or at least you can help them understand how to move forward with this kind of whole plan giving. That's been a hot topic for at least many of my clients. So hopefully this is helpful to others. Elliot, thank you so much for being here today to shine a little bit more light on why donors give or don't give, and maybe how to move through that. So thank you again for being here.
Yes, many thanks to you, Tasha, the charity CFO, and thanks for all the great content and work you do for the nonprofit community. It's great.
Oh,
Thank you.
thanks so much. Until next time, everybody. Thank you.